Hello folks, welcome to the Spookcast. That's not the name of the show. We haven't figured out the name of the show yet. I'm Jacob.
I'm Gemma.
I'm Toby.
I'm Tom.
And we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of really scary movies and scary things on this podcast. Today's episode is all about giant monsters. It's pretty hard to just pick three movies, to be honest. But we picked three very specific monsters that represent different things. So first and foremost, we're going to be talking about King Kong. So before,
my big boy.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the historic significance of the film. Obviously, it was one of the first major motion pictures to use stop-motion animation. You know, this is pre-Ray Harryhausen. In fact, this was the film that inspired Ray Harryhausen and a whole bunch of other people, one of whom is going to be really relevant to the next film we talk about. But it's an extraordinary motion picture. It was really the first great special effects film that was ever made. And I think to a lot of people, it's one of the best films of all time. I saw James Rolfe talking about this, and he was talking about how we refer to Citizen Kane as the greatest film ever made because of how much it did for cinema and how many techniques it introduced. Well, you could say the same for King Kong. You know, the stuff they were experimenting with, the sort of rear projection stuff, the front projection, the way there were some of the shots they would do. They would have one, they'd have an actor, that they'd shot a scene of an actor, and then they'd pop that in the corner. Project it while next to the ape, and of course they'd be doing it with stop motion. So they'd roll a frame of the footage and then move the ape for the frame. So they'd appear to move together. Really brilliant stuff. So his argument was, well, surely if Citizen Kane can be argued that it's the greatest film ever made just because of what it did for the industry, then surely we can argue that King Kong is the greatest film ever made. And I actually am perfectly happy to call King Kong the greatest film ever made because one of my personal favourites. I know we all watched these films recently to get into the zone for the podcast. I don't know if anyone watched them for the first time.
It was me. I actually watched it for the first time.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I think I watched it years and years ago to the point where I barely remembered it. But no, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy King Kong.
I love going back and watch it now. Any film from the 1930s, Jesus Christ. But anyway, it obviously not taking away from anything for the film. It's just I love the two characters. I forget their name. The man and the woman.
Yeah.
Who fall in love.
I know where you're going.
For no reason whatsoever. It's just like you're on a boat. Oh, I don't like you. Suddenly I've warmed to you. I'm in love with you. Oh, okay, great. I'm in love with you too, I guess. And that's the film. No.
This is a great line. It was like, oh, women. You just can't help being a pain, I guess.
I literally. I was going to mention that. I was just like. Wow! Hey!
I absolutely love that dialogue in there.
But you hate women. Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
And like accidentally punches her in the face.
Like,
he does accidentally. Yeah,
he's
he's
like,
sorry about that punch there. It's like, okay, wow.
I got you pretty good, didn't I?
Yeah, it's John Driscoll and Ann Darrow.
That's it, Ann Darrow. What a name that is. I like that name. But still, King Kong himself, he looked pretty fantastic for back in the day. The only thing is, there's a bit when he's fighting a T-Rex and he's just defeated the T-Rex. He's probably feeling all pumped up. He picks up Ann Darrow and gives him the most perverted face I've ever seen. He's like, he's like, okay, what is it, time?
I gotta say, the fight with the T-Rex is one of the most exciting parts of the movie.
Oh, very good.
But the movie really, once they get onto the island, it just steps into gear and it never slows back down.
It doesn't, yeah.
This is a great movie for kids, I think, because I showed this to Logan. Logan's our 8, not all of ours. Mine and Gemma's. Yeah, we're all in a big polyamorous relationship raising this child. We showed it to our 8-year-old. I think he was either 6 or 7 at the time, and it was his first ever experience watching a black and white movie. I think he was a little bored at the beginning, but once they got to the island, he was gripped the whole way through.
You watched the whole thing.
And it is a little scary as well.
Oh, yeah,
to talk a little bit about that, but I want to get sort of, obviously we've had a lot of Toby's thoughts on the film. I want to get Gemma and Tom's thoughts on the film as well. Gemma, where would you kind of rate King Kong as a monster movie?
Oh, I'd rate it really highly on my list. It's one of my favourite monster films of all time. Like the stop motion for itself and all that, and it's some of the it pioneered so many fantastic films after it as well, and you just have to look at that being like one of the first. And the whole story of King Kong is something that interests me in general, and you just I'll end up just kind of sucking its dick the whole time. But
And judging from the looks it gives women in that movie, he'd probably enjoy that, to be fair.
Yeah, but there's really nothing bad I can say about the film, and it's the perfect length as well.
But we're still talking about King Kong's dick.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I left the room for a moment. I come back. I just hear King Kong's dick. I come back in. It's the perfect length.
I mean, well, to be fair.
I mean, I didn't see it in the movie. He's not wearing trousers. I mean,
well, I mean, the movie is black and white. It might just be combed in. It might be along his leg or something. I don't know.
Like the acting from the acting for like Bruce Cabot and Fay Wray is like is again it's literally only about 7 years prior. Like talkies didn't exist. Like they were like some of the first proper movie actors that were actually acting and not just.
Yeah, it's amazing when you look at some of the early, and listen to rather some of the early sound films and sound horror as well. The thing, with stuff like that came before this, stuff like Dracula, there's so little ambient sound and so little music. Whereas King Kong, there's sound design, there's soundscapes. You can hear the animals and everything like that. One of the things I wanted to actually, Tom, because this obviously was your sort of first viewing of the film. What did you really take away from it as a modern viewer? Because that's another thing. Like with Logan, he's a little kid, and it's the kind of film I think kids can really enjoy. But as an adult in the modern era, how did you know?
The thing is, when I was growing up and always watching films, whenever I never really watched any old films, and I think by the time I really worked out what films I enjoyed, like what I want to see, like films I'd actually go and see. I'd probably reached a point where I can't really connect with old films as much, and I kind of did get that while watching it. And I don't know if that's it's probably nothing to do with the film, and more so just my preference. But it's always been hard to kind of empathise like that, and that's a me problem. But I really liked it. It was probably between the two older films, it was when I was engaged with the most. And certainly the thing that I remembering a lot was the sense of scale it has, and I really liked that. Like especially for the time, and like the way everything is proportioned, and like certain shots and everything with like they did in the foreground and the background. It's the one thing I remember taking away from it the most, of really noticing that's quite prevalent.
Were you on about the bit when they kill the Stegosaurus, when they literally basically first land on the island, then they walk past it, and it looks like this gigantic fucking beast, because it's just like taking them forever to walk past it. I'm like, how big are you making this fucking out? Yeah. I swear to God, it looks bigger than Kong half the time this is dead body.
The film does feel huge. I will say, I thought it was really intense. Very, very scary. Like, there's a couple of moments that I found really unsettling. One, the guy who plays the chief of like the tribe there. I don't know where they found this guy, but he was the scariest looking person.
I'm very interested to see where they actually filmed most of the bits on Skull Island, especially with the natives, because I'm wondering, are the actual natives themselves or the actors? I very much doubt it, because there was a lot of them.
Look that up.
As far as I know, it was it was shot on sound stages.
Oh, okay.
It's just an incredibly expensive film.
California, long shots, obviously in New York, and then you got the native village was a backlot in Culver City, California.
Yeah, so they were actors, but I mean they look great, don't they? With the sort of traditional hair and everything. It looks like National Geographic. I mean it's really cool.
If you said that they were actual natives, I would have believed you completely. Yeah. Like I wouldn't, it's that level.
I was going to say, like, for a script of its time, the script is really punchy. There's obviously a lot of exposition dumps, which old films tended to do back before they were able, because script writing wasn't really a thing. Because again, a lot of silent films, all the text was on screen, and it was a little bit more. I don't know how, like, what's the word, sort of just like stereo instructions, whereas like this script it was funny, it had it had its beats and everything like that, and everything tied together really well, like all the stuff on Skull Island. It's incredibly intense, and even towards the end with like in New York, it's like nothing, it just doesn't stop until right at the very end of the film.
The movie kind of shifts gears as well. It goes from, because the monster in this film is, he's the star, and he's seen as the king. He's called King Kong. He's seen as the king of this jungle, and then they bring him back to the mainland, and he's, they even say, I mean, the film is not subtle. They say the line, he comes from his land as a king, and now he comes to you in chains, or something like that.
Yeah.
And when you see these people, these flash photographers and everything, and you sympathise with the beast, not with the people he's killing. That's the interesting thing. I found that earlier on in the film, I was very sympathetic to the explorers.
Yeah. Yeah, because that is one thing that horror movies and monster movies or anything today, they don't really do what they did back in 1930s and all that. Is that they show so many people getting killed by King Kong.
It's
like,
very
violent.
It's like, alright, man. There's a whole bit where he fucking literally fucks a train track up. The train comes down and he's like smashing up, and then he just climbs up the Empire State Building.
Well, I think it's. I don't know. I have somebody in the comments could check this, but I think it might be pre-Hays Code. This film. So I'm not sure when the Hays Code came out. I know that because we watched. Recently, well, not recently, but last year when we did the underrated horrors thing, we rewatched The Island of Lost Souls, which is a pre-Hays Code movie, and that is extremely.
Came out the same year.
What that is.
That's a great movie.
I'm like...
Island of Lost Souls. Yeah, so it's classified as A.
Yeah, so 1933. So it's but there are a couple of things I wanted to mention. So yeah, he's sympathetic once he gets to the because you see this majestic. Animal, this huge, and there he is, just confused, and he's just looking for the only thing he understands, which is this girl he's sort of bonded with on the island, and then gets shot down, and then he says, of course, is it what's the name of the filmmaker?
Carl
Denham. Thank you. He says that thing about it was beauty that killed the beast. Incidentally, by the way, the supposed Arabian. I looked this up. The Arabian proverb that comes up at the beginning. Oh yeah. Bullshit. That's not an Arabian proverb at all. They just made it up for the film.
It's quite funny. It's like an Arabian proverb. Was like, okay, which one?
Yeah.
It sounds because the way they use language and put and the prophet said. So it sounds like something like, oh, this might be in like the Quran or something. I wouldn't know because I haven't read it. It's like, no, it's just some horse shit that Miriam C. Cooper made up.
Oh, fair enough.
But no, the thing Toby was saying about how violent it is. One thing that's really interesting about old movies, and it's this weird thing, and I don't know if anyone's talked about this on a podcast before, because it's an oddly specific thing, but it's something that's always gotten under my skin since childhood, is the way people, particularly male actors, scream in these movies.
Oh.
And perhaps you understand what I mean, is that there's kind of been a universal way that people scream in movies today.
Yeah.
But back then, they were still working it out. So these sort of tough, like, masculine men would do these outrageously kind of blood-curdling sort of feminine screams that are just so horrible to listen to that you just wind up going, oh, that was nasty.
I can hear them in my head now.
And even when like it looks a bit silly, like when like a guy will get grabbed by a dinosaur and you can tell where they've switched the actor out for the puppet, but the sound design is so grim. You're just like, oh,
the bit. I was to say the bit where King Kong's rolling literally all the explorers.
Yeah, that's
off
really like I watched it the other day, and that
is very.
So I was watching it on VHS because I've seen it on pretty much every major form of home video, and I was rewatching the VHS because I was in the kitchen using the little TV when I was cleaning, and that part I remember just thinking, wow, I can't believe they got away with this.
Yeah.
In the original cut of the film, the ones that survived that fell down wind up in a pit full of like giant spiders and crabs and stuff. And apparently the scene was so scary, the test audiences were running out and complaining. So we had to cut that scene out because.
I don't blame them because goddamn, I mean, obviously I know the damage that falling, but all of them are fucking dead by the time they fall down there anyway.
Yeah.
It's just not the one poor fucker that's still hanging on, and he just goes, fuck it. It's for its whole lockdown.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, it's like Peter Jackson who obviously did the remake, which we will speak about in a little tiny bit of detail. He sort of recreated that scene.
Yeah, I remember.
He recreated the scene in the film, but also recreated it for the 1933 film.
Yeah, for the DVD, wasn't it? Yeah,
for the DVD. So
that's cool.
So like so you're able to see at least Peter Jackson's view of what it would be.
Yeah.
And obviously in the film in the remake, which.
I'm not a big fan of the remake. But
Kong Skull Island is a film that exists, which I still haven't seen.
I haven't seen it yet either. So. The only thing I'm going to just say this right now. What's the point in changing the character of Jack or John Driscoll to a playwright?
Well, so I think it's best to move on to the next movie now. There's a couple of other films sort of that came along the way that are obviously important. We haven't got time to talk about all of them. Before we do that, just everyone's last thoughts on King Kong before we move on. I loved it. I loved it as a kid, and I love it now. And I would to anybody that's listening to this that for whatever reason hasn't bothered to watch the original King Kong yet. It's a movie that's been remade a bunch of times. The remakes have got sequels. This film's got a sequel, pretty decent sequel actually. This is the version to watch of all the King Kong movies. This is the one to see. Anybody else got anything to add about?
It's a masterpiece. And if you don't watch it, I I sort of go, why?
It's pretty short too, so
Yeah.
you don't lose a lot of time either.
And Darrow literally attracts every monster in the film, and I'm like, holy shit, why? Like, what is she made out of? Sorry, there's a bit where he peels her clothes off. Very risque for the 1930s, I will tell you that. So you might want to watch it for that bit. Also, how the hell does he get to the fucking New York? No one knows. It's like, okay, we'll take him.
I will say that if
What?
you,
Okay, we're here.
also if you're easily offended at the way that women are treated in the film, don't watch it.
Yeah,
Just contextualize, which
Yeah,
I know a lot of people seem to not be able to do.
I don't
But-
understand that,
Yeah, it was the 1930s.
Why couldn't people be different when I wasn't alive?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Okay, so moving on now.
Tom's final thoughts.
I liked it, especially.
Thanks, Tom. Right. Sorry. You go on.
Especially as usually I've never really managed to get on with the older films. I really liked it. There's like, and the thing that kept me the most interested is there's like a dynamic through the whole thing where it's like at first you're like, are the natives the bad people, and it's like, oh, is the monsters the bad people? And in the end it's like, oh, maybe the people suck, and it's like, that's interesting. I like that. So I enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of it's something I think I'll watch again and like pay a lot more attention to. So yeah, I'm a fan.
It's got a lot of humanity, the film, considering it's about man and beast.
And it's quite self-aware for what it is. Let's say. I quite like that.
Now, the film obviously went on to influence a whole bunch of people, Ray Harryhausen included. Went on to make films like The Beast from 50,000 Fathoms, I think it's called.
Jason and the Argonauts as well.
Yeah.
Yep, Clash of the Titans.
It might be 20,000 Fathoms, actually. 50,000 sounds cool in my head, but I don't think that's the title, actually.
Beast from 20,000.
Yeah, it's 20,000, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the film I want to talk about was partly only exists because of King Kong, but it's a very, very different movie, which is Godzilla. Now, the chap, Subaraya, his name is, excuse my pronunciation, but the guy who made the special effects for Godzilla became a special effect artist because of King Kong. He was already working with special effects, he was a filmmaker, but he went full-time on making special effects when he saw King Kong. Now, this movie is about, I think it's 21 years after the release of King Kong.
954, isn't it?
This movie came out. So there's definitely some changes there. It's a much more serious and dark film than King Kong.
Yep.
But it's equally important, I think, in the sort of the giant monster sort of pantheon.
Well, I mean, quite obviously, Godzilla. Who hasn't heard of Godzilla?
Yeah.
It's like a household staple these days. You know what I mean? Like,
Now, you didn't get a chance to watch this one, did you?
Unfortunately,
Toby?
no. I was trying to find, looking through my completely legitimate leans online, trying to find an English subbed version. Obviously, I wasn't looking for dubbed. I'm not.
Well, it's a completely different film. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But
And they just plop
Oh,
a
they did
random
dub it?
American fella
Yeah.
in for
Of course they
some
dubbed
reason.
it.
Didn't realise that. Okay.
they dubbed it and they cut out loads of stuff and they
Added
they
stuff.
completely changed the movie basically because it was not something that I think American audiences were ready for, particularly
At the
the
time.
Hiroshima stuff. But Tom, this was your first viewing
Whoa,
of Godzilla, right?
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
What did you think? What did you think of Godzilla?
I didn't like it as much as King Kong, but I liked a lot of the design. I thought the actual design of Godzilla was really good. The effects I really enjoyed. I didn't really gel with it as much, I think.
No.
And I think maybe because I just never really grew up with these kind of films, so I don't think I hold like a kind of just ingrown respect or nostalgia for them like that. I mean, it probably sounds like a dickhead thing to say.
Yeah,
But,
you
like-
fucking dick, Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
leave.
Yeah, just because I wasn't born in 1930 doesn't mean I can't enjoy these movies.
No, like I didn't really I didn't really just gel with it. I think, and a lot of the scenes just seemed to be explaining what was going to happen in the next scene.
Would you prefer Matthew Broderick? Now that's a lot of shit.
Dun, 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 dun,
And
dun.
a Jamiroquai soundtrack.
Yeah.
But for what it presented and what it was, for what it was.
So in conclusion, Tom, you liked it for what it was.
In conclusion, I liked it for what it was.
Okay,
I read up quite a few things about the film though, and I am going to take the DVD home from Jacob later. And I read that the guy, the director, he wanted to do it claymation, but he literally said no one in Japan is good enough to do it.
Ishiro Honda, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, because this film it's one of the first examples of what they call tokusatsu, which is like the discipline of using miniatures and the guy in a suit and all that. It looks great. Like some of the special effects in this film look a lot better than stop motion would have. I think.
I wouldn't know.
Was there something else, Toby? I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I don't think there was actually. You'll probably pop up back in me in about 5 minutes.
Well, obviously, this is a very different kind of monster movie. So, King Kong, in many ways, both films kind of deal with the themes of mankind's hubris. But the first one is sort of about arrogance and greed and that kind of thing. Whereas this monster is a product of, of nuclear testing. This is, it's pretty obvious. This movie is 9 years after the US dropped the Hiroshima bomb. And what's interesting, and that's actually a link to the next film. But what's interesting is that this movie, people probably know this already, but was released very, very soon after the Allied occupation, mostly American Allied occupation of Japan, ended. Now, that was for those who know a little bit about history, it was a fairly benign occupation. It wasn't. Yeah. I'm sure there were some bad eggs, but it wasn't like, they weren't going around, as far as I'm aware, like setting people on fire and raping women and that sort of thing.
They just knocked about.
It was a pretty benign occupation. It was just making sure that the Japanese were behaving effectively.
Yeah. After Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, the kind of thing that happens in this sort of situation. But of course, the media was suppressed. So they weren't allowed to talk about Hiroshima and that kind of thing because it was this sort of tremendous shame attached to it. And I think a lot of people in the United States, that's part of the reason the recuts were done, didn't want to talk about that kind of thing because they just saw it as a yay, gotcha, with you bombed us, we bombed you, and now they didn't really want to deal with the more harrowing side of it. Yeah. So it's a very, very dark and serious film. Some of the material in this film, though, I thought was incredible. Like the scene of all the kids singing, that really mournful song. Yeah. I thought was one of my favorite parts of the movie. I thought it was really beautiful. Yeah. Also, I think the guy, Dr. Serizawa, the guy with the eye patch, is kind of like what's his name, Oppenheimer, the guy who invented the A-bomb.
Yeah, Oppenheimer.
So he's sort of like he's this tortured scientist, and he's makes the decision to not let anybody use his work, and the climax of the film as well, without wishing to spoil a film that came out in the 1950s. The climax of the film is so brilliant because it's not triumphant or dramatic, and I think that's another thing that separates it. And probably, I don't want to speak for you, but one of the things perhaps that you felt so disconnected, kept you disconnected from this film, was that it's not a triumphant film. It doesn't. Yeah, it's not exciting in that way. It's kind of downbeat.
It's not so much conventional, I guess, in like the way it's presented. I think I don't really know much about it at all apart from watching the film. But it seems like the main point of it was what it was trying to say, like in the subtext almost. Not well, obviously it's very open about what it's meant to be talking about. But I felt like that's sort of more of the point than the film itself, if that makes any sense.
So what you're saying is basically the way they do the movies. They don't make it, actiony. They don't make it comedy or anything. It's basically a series. The situation is this: there is a monster. We have to deal with it. Fuck all else. We've got to deal with this shit. You know what I mean?
It is realistic in that sense, and I think there's no heroism to it. It's like we've got to deal with this monster, and when the monster's dealt with, there's just this sense of tremendous loss. And what I liked about this movie is you take something like Independence Day, where somebody kind of sacrifices themselves, and there's a big cheer. There isn't that moment in this film. Instead, it's people are just sad that it happened, and rather than being happy that it's over. And I don't think I've ever seen that in an action film before. And one last thing before we start talking, and I want to get Gemma's thoughts on this as well. My one last thing I wanted to say was because I was just talking about the climax a minute ago. I like the use of sound in the climax. It's he's in the water, but there's no stomping. Godzilla doesn't even feel very threatening in that scene. It's just a guy with the device, and you've just got that really kind of minimalistic, sad music and the breathing sound, which is very kind of Kubrick. In fact, the film it's very well made. Like I'd say of the three films we're talking about today, I think it's the most well shot of the three films we're talking about today. As beautiful as Jaws is, I think this is a gorgeous looking movie. It's shot like a Kurosawa film, but it's a monster. It's a monster movie. And of course the special effects are amazing. Without exception of one or two, which I'll talk about in a bit. Gemma.
Well, it was Godzilla. That particular film in general.
I liked it more than Tom, in case you can't tell.
It was actually because I had seen a lot of the sequels and other kaiju films that came out in between, but Godzilla wasn't one that I'd actually seen until you showed it to me about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by it. It was fantastic. I loved pretty much every moment of it. There is a huge sort of like difference between something like King Kong, something like Godzilla, because yes, and I hope this doesn't sound like too moronic, but like Godzilla,
it's always a good preface, isn't it, to something?
It's like,
But
I'm not
King
saying
Kong-
moronic,
but King Kong-
but King Kong, gorilla, Godzilla, dinosaur.
there's like King Kong is for sure a product of American. Like of an American of the American people.
Yeah, they're all freaking American.
Like with you know, it's got an American story. It's very, and again with what Jacob was saying before, it's very triumphant. Even though the ending is very sad, it's not. It's you as the person watching who's sad, not supposedly good, like, and everyone else is just happy that it's over.
Yeah.
But like with Godzilla, again, it's a very Japanese film. It's because it is a product of Japan,
Yeah.
right? It's pretty much just like it's their way of dealing with what happened.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a good.
It absolutely is, isn't it? It
wasn't bombs. It was a dinosaur.
Yeah, it's a very confronting film, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's there's a moment, you know, where the woman is there with the children, all the buildings are falling down, and Godzilla smashing the city up. She's like trying to comfort the kid, and she said, "We'll be with your father soon," and all that. And like, you don't get anything like that in an American monster movie. You know, there's no moment like that in Pacific Rim.
No.
Do you know what I mean? And there shouldn't be, because it wouldn't work. But yeah, King Kong absolutely is the product of a young, optimistic nation, an optimistic film industry. King Kong and Godzilla is the product of a nation that just lost a war and lost, you know, millions of lives in one of the
To be fair, a lot of sides lost millions of people.
No, of course, but I'm saying this is the losing side.
Yeah.
And of course, the loss to Japan with the nuclear weapons that were detonated over there. It was so tremendous and so harrowing. Like some of the shots after Godzilla smashed the place up, and they sort of do those tracking shots of just a wasteland. It doesn't even look like a town anymore. Everything's completely burned and destroyed. Yeah. Some of this film has the best imagery of the three films we're discussing today as well. Yeah. Some of those shots of the city on fire with Godzilla just looming over them, incredible really, stuff.
Really nice. You can tell someone who hasn't seen Godzilla from someone who has, in the sense of like you'll have a lot of people.
Toby.
you'll have a lot.
I got 2 out of 3. Alright, ain't bad.
It's like I was more of like you'll have the people that go, oh yeah, I like Godzilla a lot, and then you'll have the people that watch the sequels, or the people that watch it and going, you know, this film was great, but Godzilla's not in it enough, right? But whereas like it's like he doesn't have to be in it the whole time. He is not really the forefront of the film. It's what it's named after. You know, he is the monster that sort of is there, but he's not the center of it.
Get some context.
It is a lot. Basically, the whole film is full of context as opposed to actually being about something about a monster. It's about, you know, it's very human, and it's very sad, and he's just there as a sort of beacon
to sadness.
Yes.
What I do, interesting point. I did actually see the first couple of minutes of Godzilla before I found out it wasn't subtitled. What I find interesting is that King Kong and Godzilla basically start exactly the same way, in or around the boat.
Yeah, and so does the next movie.
Yeah.
Tell you what, if you want to make a good horror movie with a monster in it, start it in or around a boat. There you go.
Well, what Jacob I think was probably going to mention as well is that Godzilla, like the Japanese release of Godzilla was Americanized for Western audiences.
Came out the following year, didn't it?
Came out the following year with new bits added on, obviously being dubbed, and having the actor Raymond Burr portray like someone.
One thing that is cool about Raymond Burr, the Godzilla movie that came out in the late 80s, or I can't remember whether it was the early 80s, but it was the reboot one. I think it was a sequel to the first one.
Yeah.
That ignored all the others, and it was really dark. The American dub had Raymond Burr come back, which I actually think is kind of cool.
That is kind of cool. Oh yeah, but they sort of took a lot of the sort of the references to Hiroshima and all that sort of stuff. Because
oddly enough, that scene of all the people on stretchers and like the bodies and everything, and like the school children singing, all that's gone.
Yeah, because essentially from what you can probably gather, like what Jacob was saying before, is that America didn't want to deal with that part of things. They didn't want to go, oh, we bombed Japan and people are probably going to be devastated. They just was like, we won the war. Do-da.
Yeah.
So,
it's a hard film to make as well. A
Yeah.
film like this, because even when not just the sort of the dark subject matter, but also just physically. I mean, the amount of special effects shots in this movie, and of course the Godzilla suit that the guy had to wear. I mean, he would faint inside that suit. It was so hot.
Jesus.
Sorry, Toby, I think he's just getting some coffee. He just
No. Toby, Jesus wasn't in the film.
No, jeez.
He wouldn't know, he hasn't seen
the guy
it,
was
you know.
fainting in the suit and he still did it. Fuck, mate, what commitment that is.
Yeah.
Good on him.
Yeah, you were right about 20,000 fathoms, not 50,000. It didn't. 50,000 sounds cool, but it just didn't sound right when I said it out loud. I guess it's just like it's just too deep.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah, Godzilla is a great movie.
all right, we well,
You didn't
Jacob
need
and
us
I
to
definitely
figure it out,
recommend
did ya?
it.
I would recommend it. Gemma would recommend it, as she said.
I'd recommend it because of what I've heard. I really want to watch it now.
Now, Tom, as someone who didn't care for the film on a personal level,
why?
what kind of recommendation would you give? Would you recommend it to anyone in particular?
I think I would. I mean, I don't think it's really a film for me, but it's something I can certainly appreciate from like a technical aspect and from where it was coming from culturally at the time. Like that's something that's undeniably important, and on that basis, I can definitely recommend it. And it is again probably something I'll watch again, probably a bit more closely.
He's going to recommend it to his worst enemies.
Now, okay, so that's Godzilla. It's a brilliant film. Ton of sequels. I think it's like 30 odd sequels. Absolutely huge. Some of them are great. Some of them suck. The 90s ones I really like. Not the American ones. The 90s Japanese ones are really good.
Yeah, just if you are not, I'm speaking directly to the microphone. But like,
Yeah, that's how it works, Gemma. It'll pick your voice up better that way.
I know, but I feel like I'm talking to having a conversation. It's not. Anyway, yeah, of course. Obviously, everyone knows about the terrible Roland Emmerich one from 1998.
Yeah.
Don't watch that one.
That's rubbish.
But
Unless you got a
No,
few
that's
drinks.
that's a big part of shit.
But yes, but if you're not someone who enjoys like watching foreign language films, because there's those of you that are out there, I do recommend watching Godzilla from 2014, which was done by Gareth Edwards. It's a really good film. Yeah, Bryan Cranston's in it.
Looking forward to the sequel.
The
It's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast now, because we're talking about Godzilla.
Yeah, the sequel's fantastic. Hopefully going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
The trailer was fantastic.
The trailer was better than the first movie.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what I was meaning. But for some reason, people don't think it's a sequel.
It's because the title's confusing, because it's called Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is the title of the Raymond Burr edit. Of the, I say Raymond Burr as if he edited it himself, but the version that has Raymond Burr in it is called Godzilla King of the Monsters, so people think it's a remake of that.
Well, Americans do.
Well, I think it's just non-Godzilla fans, because this one's got King Ghidorah and Mothra and Rodan, and none of those guys were in the original cut. So I think there's been some confusion there.
So basically, what you're saying is, it's too late. There's no escape from what you have done. I'm going deeper on the ground.
I've got that song stuck in my head now. That was my own fault.
I'm going deeper.
I'm gonna get some coffee.
Please get coffee.
I'm just gonna sing the whole of Jamiroquai's Deeper Underground. Something's gonna rob me, and I can't get my head. I'm just gonna stop.
I mean, I really
Remind me to go through this and like cut out this bullshit before we stick it online.
No.
The thing is, I really like this song, the Deeper Underground song.
There's nothing wrong with Jamiroquai. What's wrong with my singing voice?
Mate, I heard you sing the Our White's Lemonade song.
In case you hadn't noticed, audience, this would be a good time to get yourself some coffee. I don't know if this is going to get past Jacob's quality content control, but, it'll be a good time to get some coffee anyway. So while we're waiting, just looking at my watch, I was just looking at time. Didn't realise I was wearing a watch.
You don't have a watch.
Oh, no! You did that in your best, David Firth voice then.
No, but you don't have a watch on your hand.
Time to do some crafting.
But if you're talking about accents, I seem to do the old prospector voice quite well. I'm going to meet down to Tom Paris.
If you think that's a good prospector accent.
I don't give a fuck. Let's go for the Irish accent, shall we? Fuck it. Fuck you.
Wow, when did Computing Forever get in here? can't see him. Where is that ginger cunt? That's extraordinary. No, it was Toby. Wow,
Toby.
That was just like a real Irishman.
I tell you what, you keep doing this, and it makes me think, well, I shouldn't go into fucking acting because I can't do any accents anyway, can I? Oh, fuck you.
So fuck you.
Fuck you. I could do a Welsh accent.
That
What?
was my Welsh accent
Like
because
5
it's no
minutes of
language.
race hate directed straight at the Irish. Like,
It's not race hate. You're trying to impel. Fuck you. I can't even say anymore. Fuck you.
You sound like Brad Pitt in Snatch.
I hear you're a racist now, Toby.
Down with this sort of thing.
Careful now. It's just Father Ted quotes
Just like tons of unusable content. That's incredible.
Well, what do you expect us to do? What a thing still.
Oh, I've left my water as well. What a...
Oh,
Hello, my name is Leanne and I'm from Swansea.
that's actually pretty good. I don't know. I mean, you know, try and do an English accent.
You're
now,
off
Gemma.
your case.
Gemma.
What does that mean,
I can't-
McGonagall?
Do a London accent.
No.
No. No.
No, it's far easier for Gemma to criticise you without putting anything, without risking
There you
anything.
go.
Is that
Hello, my name's Toby Mitchell.
I'll tell you what. If I sounded like that, it wouldn't surprise me.
Which
'cause
one? Which one of you is that? Was
Exactly.
That, was that Toby or was that the impression?
Hello.
Hello, I'm Toby Mitchell. That's fucking ridiculous. Step in time.
I can't do an English accent.
You cannot make fun of Toby for doing it for his Irish accent when that's what your London accent sounds like.
Thank you.
I was a
Thank you very
joke.
much.
Never any reason, never any rhyme.
Step in time. Fuck off, you twat. Fuck you.
Hey,
Jolly to have an holiday
Oh,
with Mary.
man,
hey, it's Mary Poppy.
Hey, Mary Poppins. Hey, Mary Poppins. I can't watch that film because of him.
I'm Toby Mitchell. Jacob keeps having sex with my dad.
You know, that's literally uncanny.
Will someone do my
What?
accent?
Also, what is that the way we all talk now? I'm Jacob Sherwood. I'll say my name before I speak.
You do that.
Alright, Jaws. Okay.
Alright, so when we return to America and to islands and with monsters, or a monster around an island, we're doing Jaws. That's the next one.
And a coloured movie.
Yes.
Fucking hell.
This one.
Jesus,
This
too
one
modern.
is in colour.
You're gonna switch it on him.
Bloody coloured movies, is it?
Are you gonna switch it on him?
Oh, yeah, flip mode. So this is probably my favourite of the 3 movies we're going to be talking about. Whether it's the best or not, probably there's some debate to that. I don't think it has the quality imagery, perhaps, as some of them. It's important in its own way. You know, we talked about a monster that was, about mankind's hubris. A monster that was about greed. Now we've got a monster that effectively created the blockbuster movie. It was quite literally consuming. The term blockbuster, of course, referring to people lining up around the block to the point where they're cracking the pavement. There's so many people waiting to see this movie. Supposedly,
I did not know that.
Supposedly started with Jaws. I believe Jaws was the first film to be released
It's a summer
in
blockbuster.
multiple different theatres all over the world on the same day.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I think
Someone
that's
someone
correct,
fact
yeah.
check that for me, but
That is
Yeah.
so strange to think, isn't it? Because the film was made in the 80s, wasn't it?
75.
Wow.
I believe it came out the same year as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
It did, yes.
which beat it to best. I think,
Yes, that was a harsh year for
I
Oscars.
think it did. It did beat it on just about everything. Although I think Jaws got best editing.
It was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest who won Best Picture that year.
But anyway, Jaws, really important movie because it introduced the summer blockbuster. But more than that, it terrified a generation from going into the water and of sharks, and probably resulted in the deaths of more sharks than
Steven Spielberg would like to admit.
Yeah, and I know Peter Benchley's pretty ashamed of that too. Based on a novel by Peter Benchley that totally sucks.
It does suck.
I don't actually
I've read
know
it.
that.
Yeah, it's rubbish. So I assume we'd all seen Jaws before.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Many times.
nobody's going to be giving their first impressions on Jaws. We've all.
I think I watched it when I was very small, and I stopped watching it when the fella floated out of the boat.
Okay, so as with King Kong, this is kind of a first view. All right, so the person I'm most interested in hearing from then is Tom. So if you want to just share your thoughts on Jaws.
But I've really enjoyed it, like pretty much all the way through. I can't really remember a point where I was bored throughout the whole thing. It was like constantly escalating and introducing new characters, all of which I really, really liked. The dynamic on the boat at the end was just it's just funny at times, and it's deadly serious, and then it's just kind of like I don't know. I really enjoyed it. Like I was kind of surprised with how much I enjoyed it, because I think when I was younger and watching it, I had like a negative kind of taking away from it, because I think I got my dad to turn it off, like when the fella floats out of the boat. And
how old were you when you watched it?
I was like really young.
I'm probably not going to show Scarlett this until she's like 12 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, Logan was 7 when he shot.
7. Okay.
I was
Yeah.
probably about like 8, 9 kind of. Yeah, when that stinger sound I think happened, I was like, "Oh, Dad, no, turn it off."
Oh, Dad, no.
Instead it to a bit of no.
For some reason,
Yeah,
you're
just
northern
like-
when you were. For some reason, you were northern when you were 8.
It sounded like South
no.
African, just like, oh Dad, turn it off, please.
He just had to appear somewhere, didn't he? Oh, turn it off. So that was me. It's infectious. The Mandela effect.
That's no excuse, Toby. Okay, so Jaws, really great movie. Very, very difficult, like with Godzilla, very difficult film to make as well. I know they had a lot of special effects problems because, of course, Spielberg insisted on film. This was one of Spielberg's earliest movies. He was really kind of a TV movie director. He wasn't a big shot yet. He was certainly considered one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, rightfully so, to be honest. But at the time, nobody really trusted him. He was a director for hire. And the studio was saying, no, you should film this in a tank. And I was like, no, I want to get out on the ocean. I want it to be real. I want it to be really, realistic,
Really real.
and thrilling. The problem was the fake shark they built barely worked when they put it in salt water, because like everything inside just kind of rusted. They tested it in clean water, and the second they put it in the real ocean, it just like sank. It's like, oh, okay.
Impressive little thing they brought. How many different things did they make? I know they made the head of it. Definitely.
Yeah, they had like a head. They had like a fin piece. They had a full. I think they had one full shark, and they had like a half shark for some shots.
That is so impressive back then.
All
Yeah.
nicknamed Bruce.
Now, some of the shark effects have aged well. Some of them have aged badly.
Yeah.
But this is going to be the first one where I really want to talk about the acting. I know we briefly touched on the acting in King Kong. We didn't really talk about it in Godzilla because although it's a well-acted film, that's not what you think about with Godzilla. This film is exceptionally well-acted.
Yeah, 100%.
The cast are great. Robert Shaw is unrecognisable in this role as Quint. When you watch him in like From Russia with Love, he's a chameleon. He's like completely different.
Yeah.
It's such a great performance. That accent as well. It's just like it's like nothing of it. It's not like the first kind of accent I would think of with he sounds American, but it's so specific. The accent that he does, it's such a like specific like yokel regional kind of voice. It just sounds great.
Yeah, it is very.
It certainly doesn't sound like an Englishman.
It's definitely from where the film is shot. It's sort of around Martha's Vineyard, all that sort of very East Coast. So yeah, it's sort of like not New York, but not.
You can tell how accurate it is because when there's a guy in it, I think what's his name, Ben Gardner, is that the character's name, the one whose head gets bitten off. When he's spoilers for a film from the 70s. But there's a scene where he has dialogue because he's an actual fisherman from the area, the actor they used, and he's saying that he's just improvising as like they'll wish their fathers never met their mothers when they get out of here and start slamming into them rocks, boy. And you listen to Quint, and the accent is exactly the same.
Yeah,
that's an English guy doing that. So that's a really good performance. Roy Scheider is really great in this movie. I think he was a really underused actor in Hollywood. I think he kind of was born in the wrong era. He would have been a great like matinee idol in like the end, in like the end of the black and white era, beginning of color like films. But mainstream color films. He would have been. I think he would have done great in that era. I think the 70s was kind of too late for his image, his very sort of clean-cut image. But I really love him in this film as the hydrophobic police chief, who's a kind of a fish out of water, which again is all... again, it's just quite obviously a very deliberate thing. And of course, he's a guy who's terrified of water, who lives on an island. And but the other performance I really like of the three main characters, of course, is Richard Dreyfuss as Matt Hooper as well. Now, while my favourite performance of the film is probably Robert Shaw, I just think these guys have such great chemistry, and like Hooper and Quint, there's just so much like rivalry between them. It's so, and of course it does sort of blossom into a friendship eventually, but they have so much rivalry, and there's this kind of whole class and culture conflict, isn't there, between the two of them? Because of course Hooper is a very rich guy. He's from the Oceanographic Institute. He owns more than one boat and all this. Whereas Quint is, a guy who's worked his way up from the bottom. He's a proper working class hero. Because we find out later on, he's also a veteran and everything like that.
Can't stand this abuse much longer.
In fact, actually, when I was getting my inland waterways license, there were 3 of us on the boat, and Sam was being a total prick to me and kept ganging up on me with the guy who was teaching us all the knots and everything. So we're on the water, and I remember shouting that. It's like, did that exact thing when I was on the wheel. I was like, "Hey, Jim lad, we'll have to take this abuse much longer." It was like, because I had to do it. I was like, I may not get this opportunity again. And I had my curly hair and beard at the time. So I was like, this is bigger than me. This moment, like.
Yeah, like the fact is, I think Richard Dreyfuss in the film is really, really good, considering how he was genuinely just starting off in acting at that point. Like,
yeah,
he'd been in one feature film as the main character literally the year prior, and he saw it and he said it was the worst film he'd ever made in his whole life, and he's a terrible actor, and that's why he's in Jaws.
Yeah. Like, he'd get crucified now because back then, of course, this is before the internet. He went on TV like slagging the movie off before it came out and everything, saying like, "Oh, this film's going to be terrible, but it's not Steven Spielberg's fault. It's Universal's fault," and all this stuff. Now, does this movie count as a monster movie? Yes, it's made by Universal, so it's a Universal monster movie, so it fits very nicely into that. But the shark, I'm going to say it, the shark is a real animal, but this shark is upscaled to the point where there's no fucking 25-foot great whites bowling around, alright?
I mean,
piss off.
Go back millions of centuries ago and you would have fucking
Megalodon.
found the Megalodon. That's the closest thing you're going to get to it.
This thing's absolutely huge.
I think the largest great white shark that was ever found was
the blue white shark.
Was between 18 and 20.
I think they have
23.
found them very, very
Yeah.
huge, but like they like pregnant ones they found like really deep in the water and everything.
Yeah, so I was saying it's about around that
But
number.
Forgetting about like the lack of realism, the film feels realistic in spite of that because it just skirts the line of believable. It's like the shark is very vicious and behaves in a way a shark probably wouldn't, but it is a real animal that exists, and they shoot the movie in such a way, lots of POVs and everything, that it kind of feels very realistic. The question is, for any of these sort of monster movies, is it scary? I personally think it is.
I think
There's
so.
a bit, oh my god, the horrible bit. Obviously, not even with the diver and the kids dying in the fucking sea. It's the bit. And he moves, when he's underwater, and he moves the fucking head coming out. That makes everyone jump.
Logan looks
It's terrifying, that bit. No one expected. Fuck.
because it's just a little sting of music.
Stinger, yeah.
It's not like a jump scare. It just comes out. And but things.
It's a really high pitched sound that I think they mix in with the scream, don't they? Because I think Dreyfuss screams right afterwards.
Logan was sitting. Not you'll not know where it is, but you guys will. It was sitting right there and watching the film, and we were looking at him while he was watching that bit, and I think he jumped about 2 feet in the air.
That's what I'm gonna do.
But like, he absolutely loved the film. Like that was one bit that I could tell that he was like, because it gets everybody. I don't care how old you are.
It's on par with the Alien jump scare. You know, it's like if you think of Jaws, you think of a couple of things. You think of the bit where he's I can't remember the name of the guy. He's sitting there getting his back massage, and then that bit you think of.
Fantastic shot of like
they call the dolly zoom, isn't it? They pull it back while zooming in. It just creates that sort of Hitchcock. Because I know Spielberg was very influenced by Hitchcock on this movie. A lot of it was because the shark didn't work, so they had to come up with new techniques to kind of keep the tension high.
The only other thing I can think that was scary for the people working on the film, just reading up here, apparently when they find Chris's remains, they see the arm. That was actually a crew member, completely buried, only her arm exposed. Apparently.
Oh man, God, fuck that.
Right, I'm like, okay, that was fucking hell.
Yeah, because and like the other sort of jump scare in the film that's sort of that again you don't hear coming or see coming is when is with Chief Brody on the boat, and he's in the water.
Yeah,
and then the shark just comes out of the water.
I would argue there's another jump scare that people forget, and that's when Hooper is in the cage.
Yes.
And you've seen it swim off, and you haven't seen it turn around. So and then it's behind the cage and rams into it. That, by the way, that scene has some of the best special effects in the film. That sequence, because they combine the fake shark with footage of a real shark wrecking a cage.
Oh wow, that's great.
That stuff, when the shark gets on top of the cage and is thrashing around, because it's a real shark on a smaller cage, the way they've done it, you can't always tell what's not the first time you watch it anyway, what's the real shark and what's the fake one. Now, I had the luxury of seeing this film at the cinema in 2012, and some guy had taken his daughter with him. She must have been about 8 years old, and it was wonderful watching, because of course this was before you guys moved down and everything, watching this little kid being at the cinema and seeing Jaws for the first time. And again, these moments where the kid would just leap up into the air. There were so many moments like that one of the cage, and of course the one you talked about, they come down and chump some of this shit, and the head coming out. I think one of the really big ones was just one I always forget about. This is when Brody's sort of submerged in the water, and then the shark just comes to
Slides up.
it just comes right through the glass, and he's still got bits of Quint hanging on his teeth.
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah.
Of course, and I love the whole blowing the shark up, because of course Peter Benchley, the guy who wrote the novel, didn't want them to blow the shark up. That's stupid. It's not how the book ends. It was like, it's ridiculous. How
does it end, actually?
The shark basically is so injured it just kind of dies on its swimming up to Brody. Brody is in the water. The boat is completely sank, and the shark just dies on its way over to him because it's lost so much blood.
Yeah, because he's got the gas tank in his mouth, isn't he?
No, he doesn't. Say in the movie, but in the book there's no.
Oh, in the book, sorry.
Yeah, in the book there's no gas tank.
In the book it's shit.
The book's really boring anyway, and Quint's like this, basically just Captain Ahab anyway.
Oh, fair enough.
But every change they made for the film was for the better. I think the special effects have mostly aged well. I think some of the shots of the shark look pretty phony, but most of it I think looks okay. One shot in particular that always gives me chills is when the swimming teacher falls off the boat, and then he tries to get back on it, and you just see, it's the first time you see the shark. The rest of the movie you've only seen the fins. Yeah, and you see it's doing this thing that a shark would do. It's sort of like stalking him from beneath. And you just see the scale of the thing, and you realise it's enormous. There's just this because the film is called Jaws, and suddenly you see the jaws. These huge teeth are just coming up underneath this guy, and I think that was the thing that probably triggered my salacophobia as a child. I saw that and I was like, oh, I'm scared of sharks now. It's like that shot of those teeth just coming up underneath this guy. I was like, that's it. I'm frightened of sharks now.
Yep.
Well, that's it. I'm fucked now.
So I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, because it's such an important film to a lot of people, most people see it as children. How old were you? Obviously, I know you've already told. How old were you when you first saw this movie, and what effect did it have on you, Toby?
Oh god, no, I was pretty late watching it. I think I was about 14 watching it, and I remember thinking at the time, okay, going with my mind, it's a shark movie. Afterwards, okay, that was horrible. Glad it's dead, because back then I was just like, okay, it's a shark still bowling about. I'm thinking it's still.
Especially when you live in Ramsgate, you can literally walk down to the beach and go swimming. Yeah.
I haven't gone. I didn't go near the sea for a while. I'm actually swam the sea for years, but that definitely made me. That definitely made me a bit more wary of the sea, and I remember things like not wanting to touch the bottom of the sea in case, when you're walking in. I don't know why. It's scary. Fuck you, Jaws.
Now I'm with you. For me, it was like I always wanted to be able to touch the bottom. I never wanted to get too deep in the water. Even though in the film they established that most shark attacks happen in 3 feet of water. But I was like, that's a line they say, but it doesn't actually ever play out in the film. So it was like I always wanted to be shallow enough that I could get back to the beach quickly as a kid. Gemma, when did you see Jaws?
I was probably around 8 or 9. I was like I was all. The thing is, this is a big thing. I've always been I love swimming. I still do, and I've been lucky enough that I went on quite a few holidays where I was able to swim in the sea, and I'd been snorkeling and things like that in sort of ocean in the ocean, and I'd read about sharks. I knew what they were capable of, and I think I saw Jaws, and I was just sort of like. There's you just had a bit. You have that just fear that's not that wasn't there before, when you go, oh shit, that's those things are in the sea, and you don't think about it when you're actually in there.
No,
because you're just thinking I'm swimming along, but you just have this. But again, you just have this. Mass. I mean, it's true that about 80% of the sea has been undiscovered, and there's not even mapped out.
Yeah, we know more about space than the sea.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I'm gonna kind of attribute this to Lovecraft. It's always about the unseen, and you just have this, and because you just don't know what's in there with you, you know. So yeah, it did put me off for quite a long time. But I love the film, and it's one of my favorite films of all time, and it always has been since then. It's just obviously when you're about 8 or 9 years old, it was probably the spectacle of the thing, and also just that little thrill of getting scared. But well, you know, as I got older and as I've watched it more and more, it's just, you know, you got to appreciate the way that it was shot. You appreciate the acting, you appreciate the dialogue, you appreciate the location, you appreciate the special effects. I think, you know, everything about it.
And you
There's always something new.
the music as well.
Yeah.
You can't forget the John.
Yeah, John Williams. Didn't he win an Oscar or win something for that? Because like
probably it's one of the most iconic film scores, and because it's so primal. The fact that the movie opens with just a POV of just underwater, and then you just hear that music, and then finally it gets to this almost like frenzied, you know, high pitched strings, and then it just stops and cuts to these people on a beach having a party, and straight away, because of your association with that music, you know one of those kids is going to die. One of you, the first one of you in the water is going to die, and it just puts you on edge.
Yeah, you're on edge the entire time you're watching that film.
It's one of those movies. Obviously, when the kid dies, it's like, okay, no one is.
Yeah, that's the moment where I think
and the dog.
Yeah, when you realise.
The dog, yeah.
I think when. Like with the kids, you know, because of course, again, that's the moment where it skirts the line of being realistic, because the kid's the one on the lilo and he sort of looks like a seal, and it's like, yeah, that's the one who would probably most likely get attacked. And it's a really nice shot, because instead of seeing this big over the top monster attack really early in the film, all you see is just kind of, you see a little bit of the body, and you just see the fins kind of roll over, almost like an alligator or crocodile, and then you see this like fountains of blood shoot up everywhere.
Yeah.
And you just think, that kid's fucking dead. There's nothing left of that kid.
Yeah.
Now I first saw Jaws, I must have been about 7 or 8. Hadn't long moved down to the coast, and I was loving going to the beach all the time and everything like that. And my mum was like, "Oh, Jaws is on tonight. Have you seen Jaws?" I was like, "No, I've never seen Jaws." And, "Oh, we've got to watch it. It's amazing." I loved it, but I think by the end of the movie, I was physically shaking. I was so frightened. But then I was talking about it the next day to everybody. I was telling my cousin, who I used to hang out with all the time, and I made him watch it. And then we saw Jaws 2 shortly after. I was like, "Oh, have you seen this movie Jaws? It's so amazing."
Yeah, it did win Best Sound.
Yeah.
Best Film Editing and Best Music. Yes.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it deserves to win Best Film Editing. It's extraordinarily well edited. There's a reason the lady who edited it has a building named after her at Universal Studios, you know.
Yeah.
Extraordinary
film. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because she created that film.
Yeah, I mean,
more than Spielberg.
Yeah, so often with these kind of movies that are made, I mean, it wasn't a low budget film by any stretch, but films that are not prioritised by the studio, films that are sort of seen as B movies that have troubled schedules, those movies are made. And the same thing happened with Star Wars. Those movies are made in the edit. Because that's when you really know what kind of movie you make. And us as micro budget filmmakers ourselves, you know, I think we've all had a little bit of that experience where the movie is, you're making it in the editing room. You finally realise what you've got.
Yeah.
It's a great looking picture in spite of a lot of the problems they had with it. You know, the actors are all great. The music's wonderful. It's very scary. There's a wonderful scene with a smoking in a hospital. Which I'm thinking, even in the 70s, I can't believe that was legal.
Yeah, you could fucking smoke.
But
anyway.
they get away with it being like, even if it wasn't legal, it's some weird little island. You know what I mean? It's like, probably doesn't have have to follow those kind of health codes.
Well, to be honest, the one thing that you were saying about the Lilo, like the bit with Alex Kitchener, Kittner, was it Kitchener?
That's Kittner.
Kittner, that's it. One thing about going in the sea again is that, because I never ever go on a Lilo when I'm on the ocean ever. Like I'll go.
Fuck that.
I don't.
Jesus, no.
Because you see the people do it on the beach, and I'm just like, don't do that.
Just
shit.
get carried away by the current, why don't you? I'm too afraid I'll end up in fucking France in the middle of the ocean, and then I'll be like, okay, now I'm fucked. Where's Jaws?
I'm even though it's a swimming pool and I know there's nothing in there.
I was going to say the same.
I can't sit on a Lilo. I can't go on a Lilo in there.
It's not a logic thing, is it? It's a primal thing. This film taps into one of the reasons it's so brilliant is it taps into fears you didn't even know you had. It's so primal. It gets right under your skin and taps into your fear of because as a human you are this kind of because we talked about the different kinds of monsters. We haven't really talked about what kind of monster this is. We talked about greed and hubris. We talked about the atomic age and everything. This is a force of nature. This creature, and it is so much bigger and more powerful than you are, and more basic and more primal. And it's
for millions and millions.
Hooper
of years.
describes it as a miracle of evolution. It's like this is something that is that is older than you, and you as a civilized person, you think, I'm the top of the food chain, and then you're not. You're suddenly in the water where you're weak. You can't move very fast, and there's this thing in there with you that if it wants to, will eat you, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. And that's very frightening. That's a very frightening thing because it taps into an ancient kind of fight or flight, instinct within every person that you'd forgotten about until you sat down and watched Jaws. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the reason it's so scary, because it finds fears, collective fears that we all have that we don't necessarily know that much about. Hell, nobody really thought about sharks all that much until this movie. Do you know what I mean? Like, unless they had experience with it themselves, people generally didn't go, "Oh, swimming. Oh, what about sharks?" That all changed after Jaws.
What about sharks?
The thing is, there wasn't really any B-movie shark films since Jaws, till Jaws came around, and then
then there's like the fucking plethora of them, isn't there?
Yeah, didn't even was it Bruno Mattei?
Yeah, Bruno Mattei made a film called Cruel Jaws, and there's a film called The Last Shark, which is like a complete fucking rip-off of Jaws.
Is it like The Last Samurai, but with a shark instead of Tom Cruise?
It's just a bunch of
Tom Cruise as a shark.
It's just a bunch of sharks, and then like a white man shows up and is like, "Right, guys, let me tell you how we're gonna fight the foreign guns." Right.
And with also Billy Connolly.
Okay, so has anyone else got any notes on Jaws before we do the challenge for this week?
I don't think there's anything else to really say about it. I just really enjoyed it. It's I think I was just surprised at how much I really did enjoy it, from thinking that, I think I went into it with some preconceptions that I wasn't going to really like it, but I really did. It's the thing I'd watch again for just leisure time, whatever. It's something that I would definitely go back to. Yeah, I really enjoyed
the scene with Quint in the boat speaking about the USS Indianapolis is one of the best pieces of.
Do you guys know
Gemma said that whole thing while pointing to the mic?
Did you guys know he was drunk? There were two separate takes that exist in that scene, and he's sober in one and drunk in the other. Yeah. And I can't tell which one he's really drunk and which one he's pretending.
Huh.
Yeah.
Now, you know what that is, Jacob? Acting.
Yeah, he's like, how do I act so well? Great movie, wonderful. Were you going to say anything else about the US?
Just that whole scene is amazing,
really
and really, it changes the tone of the whole film by that one particular scene.
You're absolutely right. We talked about how when the shark eats the kid, and you go, "Oh, this is the moment where you realise no one's safe." But the scene where Quint tells the story about what happened to him on the Indianapolis is where you realise you're no longer just watching a monster movie.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, in that scene, I actually found myself kind of leaning towards my screen. It was like I felt really immersed in that in that moment. Like, I was just like listening to how the story was going. I really, really, really liked that.
It's a real story as well.
Yeah, it's another thing. I mean, it gets to the data on it. So this is the section. This is our first episode of the podcast, so it's likely this is your first episode that you're hearing as well. So just to explain what happens is every week we set like a little challenge, sort of a homework thing for us all to do, just for fun. They're probably all going to be similar sort of ideas of being movie pitches. Keeping with the Jaws, which is the last film we talked about, this week we are going to imagine that Universal has lifted its embargo on Jaws movies, and they've decided they're going to return to the Jaws franchise, be it sequel, reboot, remake, whatever. And you have been called in to discuss ideas for a new Jaws movie.
Ooh, me first. Me.
So we're going to start with Toby.
Okay.
And we'll probably just go around in a circle. I actually knew you wanted to end.
I wanted to end, yeah.
My pitch is quite simple. All you do is take the main protagonist from the first 4 Jaws movies, right? You stick them on an island for no reason whatsoever, or maybe they're doing a talk about about surviving their own attacks, and then there's another shark, like just surrounds the building. I don't know, like surrounds the area, or multiple sharks. The sons of the sharks, son of Jaws. Just make it King Kong, but Jaws. Universal, give me the money. I will make a good movie.
King Kong, but with sharks.
Son of Jaws.
Son of Jaws. That's it. That's the movie.
Is there like a narrative to it?
I mean, the narrative is this: they decided that they're going to do this meeting because money. It's the Sam Neill approach in Jurassic Park 3. No, seriously, it's quite hard to come up with a pitch for a well-established franchise, but I say well-established, look at the 4th one. Just take a quicker shark than the next time.
Fucking shark was faster than a jet.
Whatever everyone's movie pitch is, I'm just going to say now, it's going to be better than Jaws 4, so let's at least have that. There you go.
Alright, shall I go next?
Yeah.
Alright, so my idea is it's a sequel to the first Jaws movie.
Ooh.
Kind of like how they did with Jurassic World, but hopefully slightly better.
Basically, they're going to ignore the other ones,
ignoring the other sequels. Maybe Jaws 2, but really going from the first one. But it's the present day, so it's like whatever 50 years later or so.
Okay.
And it's kind of taking a similar plot to the first one, but recontextualizing it in a world where the first movie happened and all this time has passed. And it's it would be kind of a satire on how like Jaws changed the world, the actual movie. And so the events of the film changed the world too. So the idea would be that they've kind of turned Brody into this sort of. Brody, of course, was terrified of the water and all this, and he has a hero's journey, but he's certainly not. I wouldn't call him a traditional hero. He wasn't outrageously courageous or anything. He just was the last man standing, and did what he needed to do. But they've turned him into this the way fishermen tell stories. They've turned him into this ridiculous thing, and they've sort of.
Has he got a statue in the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they've turned it into this outrageously capitalist idea. I talked with you guys about an idea for a different movie, I thought, which was here in East Kent we have a thing called Folk Week, where it's like a festival. We thought they'd have like a festival celebrating the death of the shark and all this. Of course, the Brodies have moved away. This is so offensive and terrible. So these are different characters we're going to be following. But the idea of my movie is that there's this kind of like shark festival, and everyone's kind of celebrating it, and it's sort of. What happens is some journalists trying to get good footage end up luring a huge fucking shark to the island out there, and that needs to be dealt with. But this time, rather than it being the shark that's terrorizing everyone, it's sort of about the movie's going to be about people hunting the shark, and the main character I wanted to be somebody like Hooper, who's from the Oceanographic Institute. I pictured a woman. I'm not sure why. I was picturing Gwendolyn Christie. I think it's because I was watching Game of. I think it's because I was watching Game of Thrones when I was thinking about this. But I just pictured her being this character who's ultimately has to kill the shark because it's going to kill these people. But she's not there to kill the shark. She's gone there to preserve it and make sure it gets, returns to the deeper waters safely, and ultimately has to winds up in the water with it in sort of a battle, kills it by cutting off its fin or something really undignified, and comes back to the island just with this fin as a trophy, and it just kind of
or as a thing she can
being like a flip side to the first movie. That's the basic idea of what I think I would pitch if I was in this situation.
I like that movie. As a movie producer sitting there listening to your movie, I'll be like, so are we going to have it so that there was no shark, and the shark was you the whole time?
Yeah, basically, the shark was you, and then you forgot this happened.
Yes, and you wrote this.
Tom, what is your Jaws movie idea?
Oh, God. Well, I wanted to kind of come up with something that was very, very different to Jaws. And I wanted to do something kind of almost found footagey. And that wasn't the initial idea, but I thought maybe it'll be an interesting way to do it, because you can give an water and everything. But basically, the general plot is around, I might be misremembering this, but around our area, I live in Margate, but there's a fair few basking sharks that come around in the summer to feed around there.
Yeah.
And at one point, one of them washes up on the beach and it's dead, but it has this huge bite mark out of the back of its head.
Cool.
And it's bigger than the average shark in the area. So everyone's like, what's going on? Because it's quite an out of the way area and everything, and people are skepticism about kind of washed up stuff. It's always something really boring. People are like, oh, well, it's probably just got injured and it's been infected around the area and it's and everything like that. But then they want to follow these two people that kind of come down maybe from the Midlands or Scotland or wherever, filming everything, and they go on a road trip or whatever. But they come down to the southeast coast, and so they're kind of interviewing people around the area, looking at all the pictures and everything, and eventually they want to go out and try and find whatever it was, because they I think maybe they're into cryptid stuff. I think is what they call it, these kind of creatures or whatever. But I wanted to kind of set it around the sea forts out near sea salters. So these were, if people don't know, anti-air kind of platform batteries out in the middle of the sea that were built during the war.
I think they're fucking sick, them buildings.
Yeah. they are fucking sick, as
Yeah,
Toby says.
yes, and my immortal knowledge.
And so I want to kind of go out there on like a little boat, and I was talking about anything on it, like all the way journey there. But the reason why I wanted a kind of a structure in it initially is because I've got a friend he's in Czechoslovakia, and his job is doing maintenance on dams.
Ooh.
And what they tell you to do, otherwise, you know, you can really panic, because when you're down there, you're working on the dam, you're preparing it. Just one thing you're never meant to do is look behind you, because the shifting perspective and having something right in front of you and looking back into absolute nothing, and you can see the glinting of eyes of fish and stuff, and it apparently makes people really, really panic. And I really wanted to kind of, you know, I really like that idea of, you know, maybe they're so there's this thing called I think the bloop. It's like this captured noise of something really, really big or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe so I wanted them to kind of set up some kind of seismic thing on like one of the legs of it, and he's filming himself do it, and you know, like and then you know, look back and that perspective. I really wanted to do something with that. I wanted to do like a couple of false scares, whatever. Maybe there are basking sharks around, you know, and like kind of in the water trying to find stuff. Maybe they drop something, whatever, and see there's some sharks, whatever. But eventually, you know, this giant shark does come. I don't know what shark it could be. I don't kind of like the idea of it being a great white. Maybe something that you couldn't really tell what kind of shark it is. I think that kind of adds to it.
Call it Big White.
Yeah, just big whitey.
Big Whitey. Okay.
And
Isn't that your rap alias?
don't call me out on this podcast, Jake.
Podcasted.
But basically, I kind of wanted it to cumulate. That's not a word.
Culminate.
Culminate. So it's two people. One of them gets killed, and the boat kind of gets separated from. It's maybe they're kind of setting up like a little base on the forts, whatever, and it kind of floats off, and so guy's friend's dead and he's out in the water. I want this like so it's all like GoPro'd or whatever, and I've got like apparatus and breathing stuff underwater, but I want this really long like unbroken kind of sequence where the boat's kind of slowly drifting off and he's trying to get to safety, and there's like things in the water like the rods of like the towers, and then maybe I want like something destroyed in the water. So there's an excuse for the shark to be around but not directly going for this character, so it's like looking at all the things that are broken and trying to find them, and it's just constantly darting out of focus or whatever, and then it comes like, so I'm pretty sure certain sharks come for like darting attacks. They kind of like bite something and rip it apart, and they come back at a different angle, and it's like, so maybe the guy's kind of dying and he's really close to his boat and then dies in the water. And like I wanted it at the end, so maybe in the town or whatever, everyone's like, oh well, these people disappeared, maybe they didn't know what they're doing, whatever. But like one of the little recordings kind of shows up. Maybe it was like left on one of the towers or whatever. So one of the characters' recordings exists, and on one of them it just shows, you know, oh, let's just bark. It's kind of show all the boring stuff they did. But the other one of the guy who's being attacked by this shark kind of maybe washes up much later, and then like after everything's kind of gone and the shark's gone away and it's not come back since, that's when they really discover there was something there, and then maybe that can set something up for another one in the future.
So basically, you're making a sequel bait movie.
Yeah,
I love it. You're getting the job.
Tom, you've put a lot of thought into that. I should remind you, Tom, Universal isn't really hiring us to pitch movies.
Yeah.
Like, I also, before we get onto Gemma's, I like how the tone just changed. Like, Toby came in with a comedy, right? I thought like, oh, I'll do like a serious movie, but it's a satire, and you know, social media is kind of ridiculous, so we'll make journalists the villains. And you know, and Tom's just like
Gritty.
Lovecraft, but it's the ocean.
Yeah, I like that.
I do like the tapes washing up though. I had an idea while you were saying that. Like, I just have an image in my head. Probably wouldn't happen in your movie when they're recording or something in interviewing someone behind the sea or whatever, and there's a boat in the background. You see it like get attacked or something, like something happen. I don't know, whatever. But anyway,
Gemma, what is your Jaws movie?
Right, this is Right, my Jaws movie is that the entire the entire story of what happened in Jaws has happened in real life.
Right.
You know, this is and there is and this is sort of set like in the modern time, and
Right.
there's like a sort of a small town journalist who's sort of trying to get his feet wet is
It's funny because it's about the sea.
travels to Amity Island and finds that Quint used to kept diaries of all of his sort of exploits and things like that. It's sort of like, and so that he takes it back to his town, which is a little bit further down, sort of on the East Coast. It's sort of like small. I'm thinking Baltimore type area.
Yeah.
And he starts sort of reading the sort of the diaries and things like that, and he starts getting really frightened.
Yeah.
That's because his town is near the sea and things like that, and he starts to fabricate sort of a shark attack happening.
All right.
On in the town, and starts a mass hysteria.
Kind of like Jaws 2.
Yeah. But I even have a cast sort of who I want to be, but there isn't a shark. But he goes around trying to sort of like create sort of like he starts to go like to create things, and he starts to go quite mad because of it. And he's trying to be Quint essentially.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my idea.
Quint essentially.
Should we call the character Flint? Because it sounds.
I have the mayor. I have the mayor of the town in mind, played by Ray Wise.
Yeah, well, he's just giving work all the time.
And I have the journalist in mind to be played by Caleb Landry Jones, who is who was in Twin Peaks: The Return as the coke addict.
Oh yeah, I like him.
Yeah, I think he's a really good actor.
So the guy was in Get Out.
He was in Get Out, and he was pretty much the only decent part of that film. But yeah,
hot take.
Yeah, there we go. That's my hot take.
Hot takes on this podcast.
He's kind of wanting this. He's kind of like trying to preach to this town of that, like a bit like Battlestar Galactica, that it's going to happen again.
Yeah. And
that he's like,
but he's wrong.
But
right?
he's wrong.
So it's kind of like Jaws 2, except he's not vindicated by there being a real shark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my idea.
I like it. It's bold and different. I like it. Again, like, it's cool that I think, because none of us, I mean, I talked to Tom ages and ages ago about a shark movie idea I had, which I kind of cheated and converted into a Jaws thing for this. But I liked that we didn't talk to each other about our ideas, so I think everyone came up with something a little different, which is pretty cool. I would say write which one you thought was best in the comments, but I just don't want to see loads of people saying Tom's Lovecraft one. Like, I think that would just get.
Well,
to me
obviously,
after a
my
while.
one's going to be the best one. You know, it's quite a simple concept, and I didn't ramble on for 5 years about it. Calling you, Jacob.
Tom being like a man after my own heart with Lovecraft there.
All right, thanks very much for tuning in. Next week is going to be hot takes, so we're going to be discussing without telling each other what they are. We're going to pick 2 movies each. One that everyone loves that we think sucks, and we're going to pick one that everyone else thinks sucks that we love. Should be a lot of fun. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the horror genre. And then the challenge for that is we're going to be, but sticking with the general theme of spook, the challenge will be taking a movie that exists that you didn't think was very good, what you would do to improve on it. So I hope to see you guys there for the next one. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you to all the people that are here. I would say guests, but I think this is going to be the regular team for the podcast. So thanks ever so much, and we'll see you next time.
Did you say hot takes or hot cakes?
Hot takes.
Oh.
No, there's no cakes. There might be cake, but I'm not heating it.